All right, let's dive into something fascinating today. We're going to venture beyond those simple one-word diagnoses to create a much richer, more profound map of the human mind. We'll be drawing on the amazing work of psychoanalyst Nancy McWilliams to explore a way of understanding ourselves and each other that goes way, way deeper than just the symptoms on the surface.
You ever wonder about this? I mean, think about it. For one person, a phobia is this contained issue they can work on. But for someone else, a very similar fear seems to be woven into the absolute fabric of who they are. This question really gets to the heart of what we might be missing in our usual ways of thinking about mental health, this crucial dimension of depth.
And this is where Nancy McWilliams just hits the nail on the head. She argues that, say, a phobia in a person who's generally pretty depressive is a totally different thing than a phobia in someone whose entire personality is built around fear. Just slapping the label phobia on it, it tells you almost nothing about how to help or what that person is really going through.
So let's explore that idea. So often today, the focus is on treating symptoms, quick fixes for specific behaviors. But drawing from McWilliams's work, we're going to look at a completely different goal: healing the whole person.
The contrast here is pretty stark when you lay it out. On one side, you've got this approach that treats problems like separate little illnesses, often with the goal of finding the right pill for it. But on the other side, you have a person-oriented approach. It tries to understand struggles within the full, messy context of a person's life, aiming to build what McWilliams calls an agentic self, basically a self that feels like it's in the driver's seat of its own life. So, to get to that deeper understanding, McWilliams gives us a kind of map with two dimensions. Let's talk about the first one. You can think of it as the vertical axis, and it's a spectrum of personality development. It answers a really fundamental question. Just how deep do this person's struggles actually go?
Okay, so at the healthiest end of this spectrum is what's called the neurotic level. And hey, neurotic here is not an insult. It's just a term to describe someone who has a pretty stable and solid sense of who they are. When they run into a problem, they can form what's called a working alliance with a therapist. Basically, they can stand side by side with a therapist and look at the problem together, as a team.
And this brings us to a super important distinction. For someone at that neurotic level, their problems often feel ego-alien. That just means the problem feels foreign, it feels irrational, like this isn't the real me. And that's actually a fantastic sign, because it means they're already motivated to fight it. Compare that to ego-syntonic patterns, which feel so normal, so much a part of you, that you can't even imagine being any other way.
Now, in the middle of this spectrum, we have the borderline level of organization. And just to be clear, this isn't just about the specific personality disorder. It's a much broader way of describing a psychological structure. Here, the sense of self is way more fragile. Life feels more chaotic. You see intense swings in emotion, really unstable relationships. For a therapist, the main goal here, and this can sometimes take a year or more, is just to build enough trust to form that team alliance in the first place.
Then, at the most deeply troubled end of the spectrum, you have the psychotic level. At this level, a person is really struggling with a fragmented sense of self. It becomes hard to tell the difference between what's happening inside their own mind and what's happening out in the real world. So the main job of therapy isn't about digging up hidden conflicts. It's about providing fundamental safety and helping the person just make sense of what can be a really terrifying and confusing inner reality. This table really lays it all out pretty clearly, doesn't it? You can just see the progression across these three key areas. A neurotic level person, they've got a stable sense of self, and they use what we call mature psychological defenses. But as you move down that spectrum to the borderline and psychotic levels, that sense of self gets more and more fragmented, their grip on reality gets shakier, and the defenses they use become more primitive, distorting their world in some pretty profound ways.
Okay, so we've got our vertical axis, that developmental level. Now let's turn to the second dimension of our map, the horizontal axis. This axis represents a person's go-to coping style, their signature ways of unconsciously dodging anxiety. These coping styles are built out of what we call defense mechanisms. And look, these aren't conscious choices. They're automatic, unconscious things we all do to manage painful feelings. We all have our favorites, our go-to moves, and that unique set of defenses is really what forms the basis of our personality type.
And yeah, just like personality organization, defenses exist on a spectrum too. Primitive defenses like splitting are very all or nothing. They distort reality in a big way, forcing someone to see the world in black and white. People are either all good angels or all bad demons. Mature defenses like humor are so much more sophisticated. They don't deny reality, they help us cope with it, find perspective, and handle the tough stuff.
Let's look at one more really powerful defense: projection. This is when we take a feeling or a thought that's inside of us, usually one we don't like or can't accept, and we unconsciously just sort of toss it onto someone else. In a healthy form, it's actually the basis for empathy. We project our own experience to imagine how someone else feels. But when it gets malignant, it can cause some serious damage.
This example from McWilliams's work makes it so crystal clear. Imagine a patient says this to her therapist. The patient correctly picks up that the therapist is a little irritated. But then she projects her own internal fear, her deep-seated fear of being a bad mother, onto the therapist and decides that must be the reason. You see, what is totally inside her is completely misunderstood as coming from outside.
So now we have our two dimensions, that vertical axis of how healthy someone is and the horizontal axis of their main coping style. And this is where the real magic happens. When we put them together, we create a much more nuanced and, frankly, useful map of the mind.
So here's the crucial point. Instead of just one label, you can locate anyone on this two-dimensional grid. First, you figure out their general level of psychological health. Are they in the neurotic, borderline, or psychotic range? Then you identify their main coping style. Are they mostly obsessive, all about control and order? Are they paranoid, always worried about threats? Narcissistic, focused on self-esteem, or something else entirely?
Let's see how this works with an example. So take an obsessive coping style, someone who's focused on order, control, thinking over feeling. Now let's put that person at the healthy, neurotic level on our map. Those traits can actually be a huge asset. This might be your wonderfully meticulous, super organized, and incredibly reliable coworker.
But now, take that exact same obsessive style and map it onto the psychotic level of organization. Whoa. Now, that need for control, that focus on thoughts, becomes something completely different. It might show up as a terrifying delusion, a deep belief that their private thoughts can magically cause real-world disasters. It can paralyze them with fear and guilt. Same style, but two vastly different worlds of experience.
So why does any of this matter? Why bother with this deeper map? Well, it's not about finding more complicated ways to label people. As McWilliams makes so clear, the entire point of this whole process is to move towards a more profound and effective kind of empathy.
This quote from one of McWilliams's patients, it just says it all. After a really thorough interview designed to create this kind of deep personal map, the patient didn't feel judged or pathologized. She felt seen. She felt like someone was genuinely, truly interested in the unique complexities of her inner world. And that right there, that's where healing begins.
And this framework isn't just for therapists. It's really a tool for curiosity and compassion for all of us. It's an invitation to look past the surface behaviors in ourselves and in other people, and to ask a much more profound question. Beyond the simple labels, what is that unique combination of life history and coping style that really shapes a person's inner world?